Well, after months of anticipation of who will take over Jon Stewart's hallowed seat at The Daily Show in New York, it turns out they're keeping it in the family. Trevor Noah, 31-year-old South African comedian, who will now take over John's chair. And everyone's kind of surprised. Not a lot of people know who he is. For those outside of the States, he's done a lot of comedy, stand-up sets, different places. If you're really curious, I think one of the best sets was something he did up here in Montreal in Canada, Just for Laughs. He actually did a Mark Maron's podcast where he talked about his life growing up in apartheid. So he comes from a mixed marriage background, as he calls it. His mother is white, or sorry, his mother is white. His mother is black. His father is white, and he has some interesting stories from that. He speaks several languages, and many people are thinking that part of the reason why the Daily Show liked him is he had this unique perspective. He was somebody who was quite intelligent and gave that worldly view. And I think we could all agree, watching the Daily Show over the last decade, sometimes the Daily Show is somewhat critical of America. So the question I have for you guys is, James Corden, Craig Ferguson, now Trevor Noah, I'm just curious, is my Canadian accent enough to get a talk show in the States?
We'll work
Here it is.
that.
Are you surprised, panel? Are we surprised by going with the unknown despite the fact his credentials are there? What do you think about the new selection that will take the helm and lead the Daily Show into the 2016 election?
I was a little bit happy that they didn't go with somebody super famous. When I was in Los Angeles and I talked to a couple people, that worked in production, and the kind of word on the street or whatever was that they were going to go with somebody really famous, and they were going to kind of make the show more like kind of just a weekend update or something like that, and less, having a kind of political edge. And, I kind of didn't like that. I didn't like that idea. I kind of, the Daily Show, some episodes I like more than others, like any topical thing. Sometimes you catch lightning in a bottle, sometimes you don't. But I like the fact that the social conscious was there, that the political edge was there, and I think that something would be missing if they took that away.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that Trevor Noah is a good selection because I think you needed somebody in that chair. And this is, I think, when people started talking about, when I saw some of the names that like just the general public was interested in taking over, some of those names that they bannered about bothered me a little bit, because you need somebody who is, I think, a news junkie and is somebody who is severely a political player, because they're not just the anchor or like the presenter of the Daily Show. They're like kind of the head writer. Like, you need somebody in that seat like John Oliver, like Jon Stewart, that really knows what they want and gets the overall vision and will stay there and craft those bets. So I think you really do need somebody who's foremost a political satirist, and second, they're a celebrity. But the idea of going celebrity first scared me too. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, I agree with that. The idea of going with the big name celebrity just because they're a celebrity is sort of antithetical to what the Daily Show, how they kind of started out. Jon Stewart, I don't know how famous he was before he started, or he took over the Daily Show, but from what I had read, it was actually quite small. It was definitely smaller than it was before, and Jon Stewart took the helm and turned it into what it is today. And so you're kind of getting a sort of a throwback by getting somebody who's more or less no name as far as the public consciousness goes, and putting them in that seat and saying, here you go, now take it in a new direction, or take it in the old direction in a new way. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a positive thing. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of way that they take the Daily Show now after the departure of Jon Stewart.
The one thing I will say that you touched on is there, and I do want to sort of like correct the record, if you will, not to get too pretentious sounding. But one of the things that's driving me nuts about this is I did see in the press release this morning, Trevor Noah keeps telling this little story where Jon Stewart apparently said to him, listen, I wasn't really known until the Daily Show, and I didn't have it. That's really sweet thing to say, and it's really adorable. But Jon Stewart had his own talk show in MTV. It famously failed. Jon Stewart's career definitely stalled, but there's two things that I think that are being left out of that little fun, cute anecdote. One is the idea that Jon Stewart was so famously supposed to get one of these talk shows. If you're a fan of the Larry Sanders Show, which is probably one of the best sitcoms of the 90s, if not of all time, that's actually the entire last season is Jon Stewart's replacing Larry Sanders. The other aspect of this is neat, that Jon Stewart taking the Daily Show, that whole he was unknown thing, that's great, but that show is unknown as well. And now that show is like the pinnacle of American culture, especially for news and politics people. So I think that the problem that Trevor Noah is going to run into is, unlike John Oliver, who had a long history of familiarity with that audience, Noah's only done about 3 bits on the Daily Show. He's going to have to step into that. And I wonder, in this American culture of this, like, you know, this to a lot of people, especially my peer group, this is our Tonight Show. This is the, like, it's not the same as Johnny Carson thing that I heard my parents saying when I was like 5. And so I think that it's going to be interesting to see. And I want to ask you guys this. As a Canadian, one of the things that I find interesting is when John Oliver took over his own show, but he did his own show, he changed it to a more world view a lot of the times. Like, they take on different things. Can Trevor Noah attack America not being American like Jon Stewart did, or does the show have to change a bit? Will Americans warm up to somebody else taking down their own culture nightly? Will it matter?
Well, we're going to have to wrap this up, so we'll leave this question to our audience.